Dollar store, horror. The eternal aisle. I stepped into the dollar store, the fluorescent lights overhead flickering like restless spirits. It was a place where nothing seemed to cost more than it should, where the boundaries of value blurred into absurdity. But tonight, something felt off. The aisles seemed to stretch on forever, the shelves packed with an endless array of trinkets and trash. I wandered deeper, the air thick with the scent of stale plastic and desperation. As I turned a corner, I noticed a shelf overflowing with identical porcelain dolls. Their glassy eyes watched me with an unnerving intensity. Each doll wore a cheap party hat, its painted smile twisted into a grotesque grin. I shuddered, moving on to the next aisle, where rows of DVDs seemed to stretch into infinity. Every title was the same: Zombie Apocalypse. The covers depicted the same bleak wasteland, the same screaming survivors fleeing from the same horde of undead. I felt a growing sense of unease. The stores seemed to be shifting, the aisles rearranging themselves like a maze designed by a madman. Every step I took led me back to the same spot. The dolls were closer now, their grins wider. I heard a whisper, soft and raspy, repeating the same phrase over and over. Everything is just $1. Everything is just $1. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died. I was plunged into darkness. When they flickered back to life, the store was transformed. The shelves were empty, except for a single item, a small, hand-painted sign that read, "Stock is infinite. Prices are fixed. You will shop forever." I tried to run, but the doors were gone. The aisles stretched on forever, filled with an endless array of identical items. Zombie apocalypse, DVDs, porcelain dolls, and packets of ramen noodles. I was trapped in a never-ending loop of consumerism, doomed to wander the aisles forever, buying and buying and buying. The whisper grew louder, more urgent. Everything is just $1. Everything is just $1. I screamed, but my voice was drowned out by the sound of cash registers ringing up purchase after purchase. The total always the same, $1. And in the darkness, the dolls smiled, their grins growing wider with every transaction. Dollar store. Horror. Shadow in the shelves. The dollar store on 5th Street was always open, a beacon of late-night deals and desperation. People came for the bargains, but stayed for the thrill of finding something they didn't know they needed. I was one of them, drawn in by the fluorescent glow that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat in the darkness. One night, I saw her. She was standing in the makeup aisle, her back to me, rummaging through a bin of expired lipsticks. Her hair was matted and tangled, her skin deathly pale. I watched, transfixed, as she picked up a tube, examined it with a mixture of fascination and disgust, and then placed it back in the bin. She turned, her eyes locking onto mine, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Her face was twisted into a grotesque grimace, her eyes sunken and black. She began to move towards me, her pace slow and deliberate. I tried to step back, but my feet felt heavy, as if rooted to the spot. She reached out a bony hand and grasped my arm, her grip cold and unforgiving. "Find the best deals," she whispered, her breath rank and decaying. "Find the best deals, and you'll find me." She pulled me deeper into the store, navigating the aisles with an unnerving familiarity. Every shelf seemed to be stocked with the same items: rows of dusty cleaning supplies, stacks of faded t-shirts, and bins of broken toys. We stopped in front of a shelf filled with identical jars of expired peanut butter. "This one," she whispered, her finger pointing to a jar with a cracked lid. "This one is the best deal." I hesitated, but she forced the jar into my hands. As I held it, I felt a creeping sense of dread. The peanut butter seemed to be moving, crawling up the sides of the jar like a living thing. The woman's grip on my arm tightened. "Buy it," she hissed. "Buy it, and you'll never leave." I tried to shake her off, but she wouldn't let go. The lights began to flicker, and the store seemed to warp and distort around us. I was trapped, forced to stand at the checkout line, the jar of peanut butter ringing up on the register. The total was $1. I paid, and as I handed over the money, the woman's grip relaxed. She smiled, her eyes glinting with a malevolent light. "You'll find me in every aisle," she whispered. "You'll find me in every deal." And with that, she vanished, leaving me alone in the store. But I wasn't alone for long. As I looked around, I saw her face in every shelf, her eyes watching me from the stacks of merchandise. I knew then that I would never escape the dollar store, trapped forever in a labyrinth of bargains and horrors. The jar of peanut butter seemed to pulse in my hands, a reminder that some deals come with a terrible cost. And as I stood there, frozen in terror, the lights flickered once more, and the store seemed to whisper, "Everything must go." Dollar Store Horror. The Mannequin Display. The dollar store on Main Street was known for its eclectic merchandise and questionable deals. But one display window caught my eye. A row of mannequins dressed in the most garish, mismatched outfits I'd ever seen. Each mannequin had a different expression, ranging from vacant smiles to twisted scowls. I felt drawn to them, like they were trying to convey a message I couldn't quite decipher. As I stood there, mesmerized, one of the mannequins caught my eye. She was dressed in a bright pink dress with yellow polka dots, her hair styled in a bouffant that seemed to defy gravity. But it was her face that held my attention. Her eyes seemed to be looking directly at me, her expression a mixture of sadness and longing. I pushed open the door and stepped inside, the bell above it jingling loudly. The store was dimly lit, the aisles narrow and cluttered. I made my way to the display window, my heart beating faster with every step. As I approached, I noticed something strange. The mannequins seemed to be positioned in a specific way, as if they were trying to convey a message. I reached out to touch the pink-dressed mannequin, and as I did, her eyes flickered. I jerked my hand back, shocked. The mannequin's expression changed, her sadness giving way to a malevolent grin. I stumbled backward, knocking over a nearby shelf. The sound of crashing merchandise echoed through the store, and the lights began to flicker. As I regained my footing, I saw that the mannequins had moved. They were now positioned in a circle, their faces twisted into grotesque grins. The pink-dressed mannequin stood at the center, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. I tried to run, but my feet seemed rooted to the spot. The mannequins began to move, their limbs stiff and jerky. They closed in around me, their grins growing wider. I felt a cold, plastic hand grasp my arm, pulling me toward the checkout counter. The cashier, a woman with a vacant expression, rang up a series of purchases. $1 for a pack of gum, $1 for a toy car, $1 for a jar of expired sauce. As the total mounted, the mannequins seemed to grow more animated, their movements becoming more fluid. They began to change, their faces shifting into distorted parodies of human features. The pink-dressed mannequin leaned in close, her breath cold and synthetic. "You'll wear us well," she whispered, her voice like a rustling of plastic. "You'll wear us forever." I realized, too late, That the mannequins weren't just displays, they were vessels, containers for something ancient and malevolent. And I was the latest customer, trapped in a never-ending cycle of consumption. The lights flickered once more, and the store seemed to stretch on forever, filled with rows of mannequins, each one waiting to claim its next victim. As I stood there, frozen in terror, the cashier's voice echoed through the store. "Would you like to join our rewards program? You'll get 10% off your next purchase, and the next, and the next." The mannequins seemed to nod in unison, their grins growing wider as the darkness closed in around me. Dollar Store. Horror. The playlist of the damned. The dollar store on Elm Street was a fixture in the neighborhood, a place where people came to find bargains and deals on everything from kitchenware to clothing. But there was something strange about this store, something that didn't quite add up. It was the music. Every time you walked in, the same playlist seemed to be playing, a bizarre mix of 80s pop hits and elevator music. But it was the pauses between songs that were unsettling. During those moments of silence, you could swear you heard whispers, faint and raspy, speaking words that made no sense. I worked at the store, restocking shelves and helping customers find what they needed. At first, I tried to ignore the music, but it was hard to shake the feeling that something was off. The whispers seemed to be getting louder, the words becoming more distinct. I started to feel like I was losing my mind. One night, as I was closing up the store, I noticed something strange. The playlist had changed. The songs were the same, but the pauses between them were longer, and the whispers were clearer. I could make out words. Find the deal of a lifetime. Save money. Save your soul. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease, telling myself it was just my imagination. But as the days went by, the whispers grew louder, the words more urgent. Customers started to comment on it too. They'd be browsing the aisles, and suddenly they'd look around, confused, as if they'd heard something. One customer, an old man with a kind face, approached me at the checkout line. "You hear that, don't you?" he asked, his voice low and serious. "The voices between the songs?" I nodded, feeling a sense of relief that I wasn't going crazy. "I've been coming to this store for years," he said, "and I've been hearing those whispers for years. But recently, they've been getting louder." He leaned in close, his eyes serious. "You need to get out of here. This store is not what it seems." But it was too late for me. I'd already been pulled in, drawn into the cycle of consumption that seemed to be driving the whispers. As the days went by, the playlist seemed to be manipulating me, the songs and whispers weaving in and out of each other in a hypnotic rhythm. I'd find myself restocking shelves again and again without any memory of how I got there. The customers would blur together, their faces fading into the background as I repeated the same phrases. "Did you find everything okay? Would you like to join our rewards program?" And then, one night, the music stopped. The silence was deafening, and I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I looked around the store and saw it for what it was. A prison, a trap designed to lure in the unwary and keep them buying forever. The whispers had stopped, but I knew I was doomed to repeat the cycle, forever trapped in the dollar store's endless loop of consumption. As I stood there, frozen in terror, the lights flickered once more, and the playlist started up again. The music washed over me, a wave of sound that seemed to erase my memories, my thoughts, my very soul. I was just another cog in the machine, a machine that would keep turning long after I was gone. Dollar store horror. The endless checkout line. I stepped into the dollar store, scanning the aisles for the perfect deal. The fluorescent lights overhead cast an eerie glow, and the air was thick with the scent of cheap merchandise. I wandered the aisles, tossing items into my cart, a pack of gum, a toy car, a jar of sauce. As I approached the checkout line, I noticed something strange. The line seemed to stretch on forever, snaking around the store in a seemingly endless loop. Customers shuffled forward, their faces vacant as they waited to pay for their purchases. I took my place at the end of the line, curious about the delay. But as I waited, I began to feel a creeping sense of unease. The cashiers seemed to be changing. Their faces blurred and shifted like wax melting in a furnace. Their eyes turned into black holes, sucking in the light around them. I tried to step back, but the line seemed to be moving me forward, inexorably, toward the checkout. As I inched closer to the front of the line, I saw that the cashiers were ringing up purchases, but the totals were never ending. $1, $1.01, $1.02. The numbers ticked upward, never stopping, never resetting. The customers seemed oblivious, smiling and chatting as they paid for their items. But I knew something was wrong. The line seemed to be growing. More customers were joining, their faces fading into the background as they waited to pay. I tried to escape, but the line had become a living thing, trapping me in its grasp. As I reached the front of the line, the cashier's face contorted into a grotesque grin. "Did you find everything okay?" she asked, her voice dripping with malice. I tried to answer, but my voice was trapped in my throat. The cashier rang up my purchases, the total mounting higher and higher. $100, $1,000, $10,000. The numbers blurred together as I watched in horror. I tried to pay, but my wallet was empty. The cashier's grin grew wider, her eyes flashing with malevolence. "You'll pay," she hissed. "You'll pay forever." As I stood there, frozen in terror, the line seemed to stretch out before me, an endless serpent of consumption. I was trapped, doomed to shop and pay and shop and pay, forever bound to the dollar store's twisted cycle. The lights flickered, and the store seemed to warp and distort around me. I was lost in a labyrinth of checkout lines, each one leading to another, and another, and another. The cashier's laughter echoed through the store, a cold, mirthless sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And then, everything went black. When I came to, I was back in the line, waiting to pay for my purchases. The cycle had started again, and I was trapped, forever doomed to shop in the dollar store's endless checkout line. The cashier's grin seemed to haunt me, her eyes flashing with malevolence as the line crept forward and forward and forward.